Welcome back, Shadowdorks. It's I, Grim Games, and today I'm going to give you a full overview of the adventure of my latest Kickstarter, The Color Out of Space. This video is going to be more spoiler-rich for the game masters out there who would like a little bit more context and thoughts behind the different aspects of the adventure within the zine. If you'd like to pick up a copy for yourself, use my link tree. I have several different options for you. Primarily, you can back through my active Kickstarter, whether it's this one right here through the Pledge Manager that I'm in fulfillment right now, or future Kickstarters I might have up. You will always be able to buy my backlog through that. Or you can visit my Ko-fi shop, which I'll eventually put The Color Out of Space up on here, or other options down below. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the player-facing content, feel free to check out my channel and look at some other videos on that. But for today, we're mainly focusing on the adventure. So my version of The Color Out of Space is a zero-level gauntlet, an eldritch horror adventure inspired by the short story from H.P. Lovecraft of the same name that's in the public domain. The characters starred as villagers in the Arctic frontier. Recently, a gold mine was discovered in the mountains nearby, and now your village is becoming a boomtown. One night, a glowing meteorite strikes the mountain mine and constantly pulsates this nauseating, indescribable color. When the brief Arctic day breaks, it's clear that many miners have failed to return home on schedule, and the elder of the village organizes a rescue expedition, including the villager volunteers like you. After gathering what gear they can muster, the players organize sled teams and head out to the mountain mine. So there's a little bit of setup here because it's a gauntlet, right? And so versus rules as written, you're going to have all of your players create 6 zero-level characters randomly rather than the default 4. Also, because of the nature of the adventure, instead of having them roll random gear, the sled teams are each of the players with their pod of 6 characters is going to use 10 GP in general to outfit their character distribution. When characters die in this gauntlet, players are going to roll randomly to determine which next character comes to the forefront. Additionally, if you as a player run out of your stack of 6, you're going to roll for a random other player at the table and then also pull a character randomly from their stack. And kind of why this matters, instead of rules as written in a gauntlet where when you run out of your 4, you just keep rolling up new until the adventure's over. Here, when the entire table's pool of characters run out, it's a game over. Another twist in this gauntlet, though, at the halfway point, you encounter a rival crawler group called the Murderous Mercs, and if the party defeats them, the active PCs elevate or ascend to level 1. So then you can continue the rest of the adventure as a level 1 hero with all the bells and whistles. Those characters start gaining XP as normal from treasure and so on. And should they die, you revert back to pulling from your level 0 player pool. And as a typical gauntlet, at the end of the adventure, that is another opportunity to ascend to level 1. Do keep in mind that this adventure is written with 4 human beings, 4 players as default. So if you have 5, 6, 7, 8 players playing in your gauntlet, do adjust their PC pool size to compensate. Really, the PC pool should not be more than the mid-20s. At least that's my view. So adjust accordingly for to divide that up fairly, right? So another important note here, this adventure doesn't use a traditional world map. You are traversing the Arctic wilds, and how it's set up is you have 10 randomized progression zones coupled with 3-story critical zones. Each of zones 1 through 10, or the D10 zones, can only be used once. It's also important that as you travel between zones, time is passing, so do check out how that works on page 82 of Shadowdark, but you will be rolling these time passes and counter checks in between. So here's how default progression works out, right? At the start, players are getting their gear, and then they set out. Time passes, and then you roll for your first D10 zone. So essentially, you roll a D10. Did I roll number 1? Okay, then they're going to the polar bear attack. Did you roll a 4? All right, a blizzard sets in. Pretty simple. Once you get to the halfway mark, you go to Zone A, and you see here Zone A is the Murderous Merc camp. You roll for another zone, then you do Zone B, roll for another zone, and then you're at the final encounter with Zone C. I'll go through each zone in just a second and describe how they work. Before you have your players set out, do have them roll on the villager guidance table. It's equivalent of a rumor table, but more so the other villagers are giving them pointers. Similar to the color in the original short story, it feeds as a parasite on all living things nearby. One of the ways I've also expanded the lore of the color is it's also trying to gather as many souls of its victims as possible as well, and it spreads its influence like a virus. It can rip out the soul of its victims and replace it with one that has been molded to carry out its will. All right, let's get into those zones. The danger level gets more difficult as the adventure progresses. At this particular season in the Arctic, there's only 1 hour of daylight each day. There's darkness otherwise, but the glow of the color from the mountain mine gives the party directional awareness of where they need to go. The player characters and their sled teams are assumed to have tents meant for this kind of environment already packed in, as well as enough food to feed their sled dogs for 3 days. If players need to forage, just look at the Shadowdark rules on page 90, it's right there. For zones 1, 7, 9, 10, A, and C, I have maps here at the end of the zine meant specifically for those encounters. But for all the other areas, as well as random encounters, I have 4 multi-purpose maps that can be used interchangeably, or you can always design and make up your own. One note about the random encounter table here, this greater ice elemental option only comes into play if a certain outcome is achieved or lack thereof in zone 9, so don't worry about that unless that happens to come up. All right, so we're going to start with zones 1 through 10. These are the D10 zones, and then after that, we'll go into the story critical zones. All right, in zone 1, the players will encounter the wreckage of a group of miners, a sled team, headed towards the mountain mine that was ambushed by something. It's quite a gruesome sight, and lots of their gear is scattered about. One of the key pieces of loot here is they find a keg of blasting powder intact, which can be a really useful tool, especially with the fuse cord that can be divided up and give you timed detonations as you see fit. However, if the polar bear awakens here, boy oh boy, is that a incredibly difficult encounter especially for 0 level villagers. So there's probably going to be a lot of brutal slaughter, or your players are going to run like mad, or maybe they put that blasting powder to use. But a cool treasure can be found here, the coin of Geed, which interacts with luck a little bit, and is really special if the character happens to have been a follower of Geed since character creation. D10 zone number 2 is the lone survivor. Players choose to rescue this individual, gives them a nice boon of survival there. Our third possible D10 zone is a Arctic wolf pack on the hunt, and these can be very dangerous, especially if they seize that surprise round. So player characters, watch out. Our fourth D10 zone is an environmental encounter with a blizzard setting in. With sight reduced to close, the players can either choose to press through it and rely on their dogs to help navigate through and avoid danger, or they can choose to hunker down, wait out the storm, and play it safe. D10 zone number 5 is one of my favorites, as we get to experience our interpretation of the Wandering Merchant. And he sticks out like a sore thumb in these Arctic conditions, which might cause a lot of suspicion among the players. The Wandering Merchant's totally friendly, wants to trade stories and then trade gear. His value assessment is very different from the player's perspective, so you present an item that you might think is mundane, and he'll give you a roll on that treasure table. And if you happen to encounter him later in the adventure and have something more valuable to trade, you can get advantage on that treasure roll. In D10 zone number 6, 2 sled teams, miner teams, have crashed into each other. The dogs are all tangled up, and the miners are all battling in a scrum against each other. Turns out, half of them are corrupted by the virus light. If you save these miners, they might be interested in trading some of their gold, because they were not thinking about any other survival gear. They were thinking about their money. Zone 7 is one of the most dangerous ones. The players find the village's priest of Geed, his bones here, picked clean. There's also several ration containers that are completely picked clean as well. And there's a peculiar flock of birds, eyes radiating the color's light, coming towards the players. This swarm of birds comes in waves. Will the players fight, or will they run? Zone 8, trapped under ice. Players find an ice fishing tent, but the hole is way larger than it should be, and way larger than is usually deemed safe. There is a corrupted fisherman, a color thrall, that is lying in wait under the water, who's trying to corrupt all of the different fauna under there, but notices the players and tries to pull them down into the cold below. There's also a little fun magic fishing item here as well. All right, zone 9, really cool. Also, the art is fantastic. The disturbed ice elemental. Essentially, this ice elemental slumbers most of the year and is quasi-worshipped by the local druids. A horde of assorted thralls have disturbed it, assaulting it, and are trying to corrupt this very powerful entity. Should the players help defeat this swarm and fight alongside the ice elemental, they'll receive a blessing from it. Should the players roll for Zone 9 and choose to ignore the plight of the ice elemental, that's when it eventually gets corrupted and becomes the replacement outcome for rolling a 1 on a random encounter. All right, the last random D10 zone is zone number 10, and this is actually a little bit of a puzzle. The Preserved Observatory, it was once a floating wizard tower, and unbeknownst to anybody at this point, it eventually collapsed, and this observatory is all that's left. It's magically preserved. It fell from the sky and just happened to all be intact, except, of course, all the walls around it. And inside you find some interesting contraptions. Number one, you have an ancient telescope, and it's looking up at the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, which doesn't make much sense because that disrupts the view of the stars. So that's odd. Second, there are 4 crystals nearby that each bear the mark of a different element in alchemy. And finally, there's the cosmic synthesizer. In the middle of it, it has a illusory projection of the sun and of the earth, or in this case, Sol and Terra. If players look into the telescope to investigate, they see a little remnant of the floating tower still magically held up in the sky, and there's a treasure chest glowing there that's taunting them. It's much too far away to interact with, so that is a bit confusing. Each of the crystals on the table lie dormant, but with some experimentation, the players might reactivate or rekindle their elemental energy. A pulsating rune on the synthesizer brings up illusory sockets in the middle of the sun and in the earth. So the clues laid out here with the telescope looking at the northern lights and the series of alchemical stones, and then the synthesizer with the sockets. The players might stumble, not figure it out, but the way to solve this puzzle is to synthetically create the Aurora Borealis. In reality, when solar particles collide with oxygen and nitrogen in the atmosphere, that collision, my non-scientific background, creates that phenomenon that we see. And so the alchemical version here, right, a charged fire crystal put into the sun and a charged air crystal put into the earth, that combination will create this synthetic result. Oxygen and nitrogen being predominantly in the air, there's the air crystal. Solar particles represented by the fire crystal placed into the sun. When those things are put together, a stream of light emanates from the cosmic synthesizer that resembles the Aurora Borealis. My mind kind of went to Rainbow Road from Mario Kart. But this stream of energy travels up to the tower remnant and the treasure chest there, and it's traversable. Any miscalibration will trigger a alchemical mishap, which you can see in the alchemist section of the zine. You can find a wand here with a new spell called the Wand of Aurora, and it functions very similar to like glitter dust or fairy fire and other systems. All right, now we're going to look at zones A through C, which are going to take place in every adventure that you run, regardless of the other D10 zones that are randomized. So at that midpoint, you will first encounter the murderous mercs at the merc camp. So what they've done is they've already ambushed some other miners at sort of a choke point in the geography, and they've been lying in wait for you and other villagers or rescuers or miners to come by so they can continue to rack up the kills and steal their stuff. 3 are close to the fire, waiting for to see the PCs in line of sight. 1 stealths to sneak attack with her crossbow. Once the PCs are in range, the leader gives the order to fire. 3 mercs stand close to the bonfire, and they've placed 3 obscuredly labeled powder kegs as well right next to them. Their strategy here is to fire upon the PCs to draw in as many as they can within close, and on the Game Master's turn, that group retreats back. There's a hidden keg in the snow, and they pick that up and throw it into the fire and explode all the PCs that they've drawn in. So all these mercs are the live dangerously types. If they notice the player, notice their trap, and start lobbing in fire of any kind, they definitely retreat and change their strategy and abandon trying to lure them into this trap. Now, once the murderous mercs are defeated, the players have hit the halfway point, and this is their rite to passage for ascension to level 1. You pause here, have everybody choose their character class, do the level 1 talent table stuff. Players will loot these bodies and get some decent weapons and armor for their level 1 loadout. Might just help them survive the rest of the adventure. All right, 3/4 of our way through, we're going to hit Zone B. Here we're going to find a really peculiar scene. 4 corrupted miners are standing over a 5th kneeling in the snow. The one that's kneeling seems to be looking up at the stars and mumbling something to himself. If the player characters avoid intervening right away, these color thralls are very confused and they continue to interact with their kneeling companion as outlined in round 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now again, this encounter can be totally avoided if the PCs just decide to wait and move on, but if they do intervene and investigate, they'll notice that the kneeling miner again appears as a color thrall, but actually possesses an extremely strong-willed soul from an alien world. Our actual Earth is kind of what I'm going for here. Players won't know this, but this particular soul that's been implanted in this miner is one that was captured long ago from our Earth and was a priest of the Christian faith. He's reading Psalms 23 as sort of like a chant, sort of shielding him from full control by the color out of space. If the PCs get close and examine his eyes, they see a vision of the soul's past. They see a blasted heath of farmland devoid of all life. They see a drained husk with an unfamiliar prayer book and holy symbol. The vision speaks, "I was too late. Finish what I could not." So in my lore here, this priest encountered the color and attempted to exorcise it and cast it out and send it back to the stars or whatever. Tried to intervene to help people, but failed for whatever reason. When a PC exit this vision, they experience a miracle. They have in their hands that same prayer book and a silver cross of a god that is alien to them. But this gives the PCs access to a special spell, Exorcism, which functions as sort of a ritual. All the PCs who contribute to it over the course of a few rounds perhaps can help for it to trigger its magical effect. And you'll see how this can be useful for an alternative way to resolve the end boss encounter here shortly. All right, and then the adventure finally concludes at the final boss encounter at the mountain mine in Zone C. So the mountain mine is relatively new. Not much has been excavated. There's only a few offshoots in the main chamber. Players will see the large wound in the mountain where the meteorite plunged through and landed here. Underneath this glowing meteorite are huge mounds of ash and dried up husks and bone. And the players start to have their minds assaulted as represented by this passage. As an in-boss gauntlet battle, this can be pretty rough and can churn through lots of characters, as gauntlets tend to be. So the color starts by, again, assaulting everybody's minds, and everybody is required to make a check. And if you fail, you pull from your stack of level 0 PCs. Some of the villagers' minds are bent towards helping the color and will contribute to fighting the active PCs. If you got some of the boons from the Defiant Soul, then those can also be helpful here. There's some minor additional enemies that are on site that also join the encounter. There's some mining equipment nearby that players might get creative with. The combat encounter can continue to get precarious as every round you're rolling to see if reinforcements arrive. But an important option you really want to communicate to the players is that they have the option to sort of rally the other villagers that are in reserve and have them join the fight, this culminating event as NPCs in the player count. So the players can stack a little bit more action economy on their side of the equation. And if the color's defeated, it leaves behind a really cool magic item. Before moving on though, I'd like to look at the color's stat block so you can make sense of the encounter a little bit more. So every turn, if there are targets within double near, it's going to use its color tendrils, which only hit for 1 HP, but they trigger a life drain, which is a D6 con damage. If they go to 0 con, they are cooked. If nobody's within double near for the tendrils, it shoots 1 color missile at distance far. That has the same effect. Whether it uses the tendrils or the color missile, there's a 50% chance every round that it emanates a corrupting pulse. What this does is all the players need to make a charisma check, or they'll take charisma damage, and this will whittle them down on the charisma angle, and if they end up with 0 charisma, they rise as a color thrall as well to fight the active players. At the end of the round, the color will feed on 1 dead creature within range, and this gives it +1 HP. One of the things I've added to the color's lore is that it's theophobic, it fears the gods, largely because it's accumulated so many souls over time, and you know, the gods either wish to free these souls or perhaps consume them themselves. So as the color travels as a parasite of the cosmos from planet to planet, it's also jealously guarding its collection. So spellcasters can use this with a bit of role-playing to their advantage. And if they acquired the Exorcism spell, this is actually an alternative way to defeat it. If they're able to successfully cast the Exorcism ritual, it banishes all of its trap souls and reduces the color immediately to 0 HP. Whether it's been reduced to 0 through conventional means or through the Exorcism spell, this is when the color attempts to flee back to the stars. Wherever you are in the initiative order, once it's hit to 0, it immediately regains 1 HP per active PC at your table. So if you have 4 players, it gains 4 HP. It starts to rapidly flash and violently vibrate, shaking the mountain. You have 2 saves here that affect the player's ability to fight while the color is trying to escape. If the PCs reduce it to 0 from here, the color is defeated. The players are unable to kill it when it gets its next turn. It flies back to the stars, and there's a chance the mine will collapse. Either way, if they've destroyed it or it flees, the color is no longer a threat. And this is when you would go to the aftermath page to conclude the adventure. The monster section here is nothing crazy. You just have the stat blocks for everything that's unique in this particular adventure, as well as references to all of the things you can find in the Shadowdark core book. One thing about the thralls that's important is they, combine their tactics to try to corrupt players. One might initiate a tackle so that the other can pull off a corruption. Or the thrall birds, if they swarm together around a target and they meet that number threshold, they can trigger that save. And regardless of the grouping of thralls, they can mix and match. A dog might tackle, and a regular thrall might apply the corruption, or a bird or whatnot. The Aftermath section gives you some advice on how to conclude the adventure. Option 1 here is largely for if the players are wiped out and get a game over. If the players defeated the color out of space but died in the Aftermath, number 2 is for that purpose. If the player characters defeated the color out of space conventionally and survived, that's what number 3 is for. And number 4 is the special ending if you defeated the color out of space using the Exorcism spell. And the main reward for victory is you get a nice chunk of gold to contribute to a carousing event. And as in all my adventures, I like to generate a unique carousing table that can be used for this adventure. You could also adapt it to other adventures that seem applicable with these outcomes. And of course, I do like to add a little bit of an expanded tier in case you end up having something like a bard that can have the option to expand a carousing range, or other boons that you come up with. And finally, a quick tour of the maps. Again, these are created with Dungeon Alchemist, highly recommend. First, you have the multi-purpose maps that you could use for random encounters or for the locations that don't have a specific map. Also, of course, you can make up your own. And then Area 1, the Polar Bear Attack, 7, Phlox Fury, 9, Disturbed Ice Elemental, 10, the Preserved Observatory, A, Merc Camp, and C, the Colors Cave, all have their own dedicated maps that are included in the zine and also in the map pack. And as a reminder, if you like this content, feel free to pick up the Color Out of Space. You can use all my links in the link tree down below. You can find it on my active Kickstarter or in my Ko-fi shop or whatever. All right, and that does it for the Color Out of Space. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like, hit subscribe, comment down below what's your favorite thing about the adventure or H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. And we'll see you next time, and may all your torches never go out.